The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of courtroom 7B, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. At the bench sat Judge Richard Harrison, known throughout the county for his stern demeanor and sometimes harsh treatment of young offenders. His silver-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he peered down at the next case on his docket. A young black teenager walked into the courtroom, her head held high despite the whispers that followed her. Alexandra Thompson, just 17 years old, wore a simple navy blue blazer and carried a worn leather messenger bag. She was here to contest a traffic violation, a seemingly minor case that would normally take just minutes of the court's time. Judge Harrison barely glanced up from his papers. "Another teenage driver who thinks they know better than the law," he muttered, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear. A few court officers snickered, and Alexandra's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I'd like to present evidence that the traffic signal at the intersection of Oak and Main was malfunctioning on the day in question." The judge let out a dismissive laugh. "Young lady, do you really think you can come into my courtroom and argue about traffic signals? Do you even understand how traffic laws work?" Alexandra remained composed, though her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. The judge's condescending tone was nothing new to her. She'd faced similar prejudices throughout her academic career. What Judge Harrison didn't know was that Alexandra wasn't just any teenager. "Actually, Your Honor," she replied, reaching into her bag, "I do understand how traffic laws work. I've spent the last 3 years studying law through an accelerated program at the State University's law school, where I'm currently the youngest student in their history." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison's smirk faltered slightly, but he maintained his dismissive attitude. "A few college classes don't make you a lawyer, young lady." Alexandra pulled out a carefully organized folder. "You're absolutely right, Your Honor. But passing the state bar exam last month does." She produced her newly minted bar card, along with time-stamped footage from the traffic camera showing the malfunctioning signal. The color drained from Judge Harrison's face as he examined the documents. This 17-year-old girl standing before him wasn't just any teenager, she was a certified lawyer, having completed an extraordinary academic journey through a specialized early admission program. "The footage clearly shows the signal malfunction," Alexandra continued, her voice gaining strength. "Additionally, I've gathered affidavits from 3 other drivers who experienced the same issue that day. According to State Traffic Code Section 425.3, a malfunctioning traffic signal releases drivers from liability if they exercise reasonable caution, which the evidence shows I did." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Judge Harrison struggled to maintain his composure. He hadn't just underestimated a teenager, he'd publicly mocked a qualified member of the bar, something that could have serious consequences for his reputation and career. The next few minutes were tense as Alexandra methodically presented her case. She cited relevant precedents, referenced specific statutes, and demonstrated a command of the law that would have impressed even seasoned attorneys. The young officers who had laughed earlier now watched in amazed silence. Judge Harrison realized he had 2 choices: continue his arrogant behavior and risk both his reputation and a potential ethics complaint, or acknowledge his mistake and treat this remarkable young woman with the respect she deserved. "Ms. Thompson," he finally said, his tone notably different, "your presentation of the evidence is thorough and your legal arguments are well-reasoned." He paused, removing his glasses and placing them on the bench. "I find myself in the unusual position of having to apologize for my earlier behavior. It was unbecoming of this court, and more importantly, it was unfair to you." Alexandra stood quietly, accepting the judge's apology with grace. "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your willingness to acknowledge the mistake. Perhaps we can both learn from this experience. I know I have." The judge nodded, a genuine smile replacing his usual stern expression. "Case dismissed," he announced, bringing down his gavel. "And Ms. Thompson? I look forward to seeing more of your work in my courtroom, this time, as counsel. As Alexandra packed up her materials, she could feel the energy in the courtroom had shifted. Several attorneys present approached to introduce themselves, and even the bailiff gave her a respectful nod. She had done more than win a traffic case, she had challenged preconceptions and demonstrated that justice truly is blind to age and appearance. Judge Harrison watched as she left the courtroom, her head still held high. He pulled out his notepad and began writing, not court notes, but a letter to the Judicial Review Board. It was time to acknowledge that even experienced judges needed regular training on bias and prejudice in the courtroom. His encounter with Alexandra Thompson had taught him that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources, and that true justice required an open mind and an humble heart. The story of how Alexandra Thompson became the youngest lawyer in the state began long before that fateful day in Judge Harrison's courtroom. In her modest two-story home on the east side of town, her mother Catherine sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by old photographs and newspaper clippings, sharing their family's journey with a local reporter who had become intrigued by the courtroom incident. Alexandra was always different, Catherine explained, running her fingers over a photo of a tiny girl surrounded by books rather than toys. By age 3, she was already reading full sentences. By 5, she was devouring chapter books meant for middle schoolers. The kitchen walls told their own story. Academic awards, spelling bee championships, and debate team trophies lined every available space. But it wasn't just academic achievements that shaped Alexandra's path to becoming a lawyer. Her grandfather, William Thompson, had been one of the city's first black police officers in the 1960s, facing daily discrimination while maintaining his commitment to justice. Dad used to tell Alexandra stories about his time on the force, Catherine continued, her eyes growing distant with memories. He'd talk about how he had to be twice as good to get half the respect. But he always emphasized that changing the system had to happen from within. Alexandra's extraordinary journey through education wasn't without its challenges. At age 12, while her peers were preparing for middle school dances, she was already taking high school advanced placement courses. The local school board initially resisted her accelerated progress, claiming it would be socially detrimental. That was actually what sparked her interest in law, Catherine revealed with a proud smile. When the school board tried to block her advancement, Alexandra spent 3 days in the library researching education laws and precedents. She presented such a compelling case at the board meeting that they not only approved her advancement but also created a new gifted program policy. The reporter scribbled notes frantically as Catherine shared more details about Alexandra's path. There were countless late nights of study, summer breaks spent in academic programs instead of at the pool, and the constant challenge of being the youngest person in every classroom. But Alexandra wasn't just buried in books. She volunteered at the local youth center, tutoring other teens and helping them understand their rights. She started a legal awareness club at her high school, bringing in local attorneys to speak about various aspects of the law. Even as she pursued her own accelerated education, she was always thinking about how to lift others up. The hardest part wasn't the studying, Alexandra had confided to her mother one evening. It was watching other kids my age face unfair treatment because they didn't know their rights or have access to legal resources. The State University Law School's early admission program had never seen an applicant quite like Alexandra. At 15, she submitted an application that included not only perfect test scores but also a proposal for a youth legal education initiative she had developed. Dean Patricia Chen, who had initially been skeptical of admitting someone so young, now keeps a framed photo of Alexandra's first day of law school on her office wall. She challenged our preconceptions about age and capability, Dean Chen told the reporter in a separate interview. Alexandra didn't just excel academically, she brought a fresh perspective that made everyone, including the professors, think differently about the law. The law school years were intense. Alexandra balanced a full course load with continuing her youth advocacy work. She established a free legal advice clinic staffed by law students, focusing particularly on helping young people understand their rights in school and work situations. There were definitely moments of doubt, Catherine admitted, showing a photo of Alexandra asleep at their dining room table, surrounded by law books. But whenever things got tough, she'd remember her grandfather's words about being the change you want to see in the system. The day Alexandra passed the bar exam was a celebration for the entire community. The local youth center, where she had spent countless hours volunteering, hosted a party that brought together people from all walks of life, from high school students she had tutored to senior partners from law firms who had heard about her remarkable journey. What makes Alexandra special isn't just her intelligence, her former high school principal reflected. It's her ability to connect with people, to make complex legal concepts accessible to everyone, and her unwavering commitment to using her knowledge to help others. The incident in Judge Harrison's courtroom wasn't just a victory for Alexandra, it was a culmination of years of preparation, dedication, and a deep-rooted desire to prove that justice should be blind to age, race, and preconceptions. Back in their kitchen, Catherine wrapped up the interview by sharing one final photo, Alexandra at age 7, wearing her grandfather's oversized police hat and holding a toy gavel. She always knew she wanted to be part of the justice system, Catherine said softly. But she wanted to do it her way, by breaking barriers and opening doors for others. As the reporter packed up his notebook, he glanced at the latest addition to the kitchen wall, a newspaper clipping about the courtroom incident with Judge Harrison. The headline read, "Teen Lawyer Teaches Valuable Lesson About Judgment." Below it, Alexandra had pinned a note, "This isn't just my victory, it's a victory for every young person who's ever been underestimated." The story of Alexandra Thompson was more than just a tale of academic achievement or legal prowess. It was a testament to the power of determination, the importance of family support, and the ability of one young person to challenge and change long-standing prejudices in the legal system. Her journey from precocious child to groundbreaking young lawyer was just the beginning of what promised to be a remarkable career dedicated to justice and positive change. News of the courtroom encounter between Alexandra Thompson and Judge Harrison spread through the legal community like wildfire. What started as courthouse whispers soon evolved into a catalyst for change that nobody had anticipated. 2 weeks after the incident, the marble halls of the State Bar Association buzzed with activity during their monthly meeting. The usual discussions about procedural updates and case law had been temporarily set aside for a more pressing matter, the impact of Alexandra's case on the local legal landscape. "I was there that day," said attorney David Chen, a veteran public defender of 20 years, addressing the packed conference room. "What I witnessed wasn't just a teenage lawyer winning a case, I saw decades of institutional bias crack right open." He paused, adjusting his tie. And honestly, it was about time. The meeting room, usually filled with casual chatter and the rustling of papers, sat in contemplative silence. Many of the attorneys present had their own stories of facing prejudice or witnessing discrimination in the courtroom, but few had seen such a dramatic challenge to the status quo. Lisa Rodriguez, the newly appointed head of the County Legal Aid Society, stood up next. "Since that day, our office has received over 50 calls from young people interested in legal education and early admission programs. Alexandra didn't just win a case, she opened a door that many didn't even know existed." The impact wasn't limited to aspiring lawyers. Courthouse staff reported a noticeable change in how judges handled cases involving young defendants and pro-se litigants. The dismissive attitudes and rushed hearings that had once been common were being replaced by more patient, thorough proceedings. Even the courthouse security officers had something to share. Officer James Wilson, who had been checking IDs at the courthouse entrance for over a decade, noticed the difference. "You should see how the young people walk in now," he said during his lunch break. "There's this new confidence in their step. They're not just scared kids anymore, they know they have a right to be here." The local law schools weren't far behind in responding to the changing tide. State University Law School, where Alexandra had made history, announced the creation of the Early Excellence in Law program, specifically designed to identify and support gifted young students interested in legal careers. Alexandra's success challenged our traditional thinking about legal education, Dean Patricia Chen explained during the program's announcement. Age doesn't determine capability, passion, dedication, and intelligence do. We need to nurture these qualities whenever we find them. The story caught the attention of national legal publications. The American Bar Journal featured an in-depth article titled Redefining Legal Readiness, Age, Bias, and the Future of Law. Legal blogs and social media channels lit up with discussions about accessibility in legal education and representation. Back at the county courthouse, subtle but significant changes were taking place. Judge Harrison's courtroom, once known for its strict formality and intimidating atmosphere, had undergone a transformation. The judge had requested the installation of a youth liaison desk, staffed by law students who could help young people understand court procedures before their hearings. "If there's one thing I learned from Ms. Thompson," Judge Harrison shared during a judicial conference, "it's that our role isn't just to preside over cases, it's to ensure that justice is truly accessible to everyone who walks through those doors." The local bar association created a mentorship program, pairing experienced attorneys with high school students interested in legal careers. Alexandra, despite her youth, was asked to serve on the program's advisory board, bringing her unique perspective to its development. "The legal system can be intimidating," Alexandra explained during the program's launch. "But it doesn't have to be. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you, one opportunity to prove yourself, or one moment of standing up for what's right to create lasting change." The changes weren't just procedural. Law firms across the city began examining their own biases in hiring and promotion. The prestigious firm of Reynolds and Baker, known for its traditional approach, announced a new diversity initiative specifically focused on identifying and supporting young legal talent from underrepresented backgrounds. Ms. Thompson's case reminded us that excellence doesn't wait for arbitrary age requirements, said senior partner Rachel Reynolds. "We need to be proactive in finding and nurturing talent, wherever and whenever we find it." Community organizations took notice too. The city's youth centers began offering legal awareness workshops, teaching young people about their rights and the importance of civic engagement. These sessions, often led by volunteer lawyers inspired by Alexandra's story, quickly became popular among local teens. "Before Alexandra, I never thought someone like me could be a lawyer," said 16-year-old Destiny Clark during one of these workshops. "Now I know that with hard work and determination, anything is possible." The impact even reached the political sphere. City council members began discussing reforms to make the legal system more accessible and understandable to young people. Proposals included simplified court procedures for minor offenses and increased funding for youth legal education programs. 6 months after the courtroom incident, the State Bar Association held its annual gala. The event, usually a formal affair focused on honoring senior members of the legal community, took on a different tone. Alexandra was invited as a keynote speaker, her presence a testament to the changing face of the legal profession. "The law doesn't discriminate based on age, race, or background," she told the assembled crowd. "Neither should we. Every person who seeks justice deserves to be heard, respected, and treated fairly. Sometimes it takes an unexpected moment to remind us of this fundamental truth." As she concluded her speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Among them was Judge Harrison, who had become one of the most vocal advocates for systemic change in the courthouse. The man who had once laughed at a teenage lawyer was now leading the charge for a more inclusive and accessible justice system. The ripples of change continued to spread, touching lives far beyond that one courtroom encounter. What had started as a simple traffic case had evolved into a movement, challenging long-held assumptions and opening new possibilities for the next generation of legal minds. In the end, the story of Alexandra Thompson and Judge Harrison became more than just a cautionary tale about prejudice. it became a blueprint for positive change, showing how one moment of courage could transform an entire community's approach to justice. Judge Richard Harrison sat alone in his chambers, staring at the leather-bound journal on his desk. It had been a gift from his wife 30 years ago, when he first took the bench, meant to record the highlights of his judicial career. Today, 3 months after his encounter with Alexandra Thompson, he finally opened it to write. "I've spent 3 decades believing I was serving justice," he wrote, his usually firm handwriting slightly unsteady. "But it took a 17-year-old to show me the difference between serving justice and merely enforcing the law." The judge's journey of self-reflection hadn't been easy. The first few days after the incident with Alexandra, he'd struggled to sleep, replaying the moment he'd laughed at her in his mind. His wife, Grace, a retired school teacher, had noticed the change in him immediately. "Richard," she'd said one evening, finding him in his home office surrounded by old case files, "what are you looking for?" "Patterns," he'd replied, without looking up. "I'm reviewing every case involving a young defendant from the past 5 years. I need to know if what happened with Ms. Thompson was an isolated incident or—" He trailed off, but Grace understood. The results of his review had been sobering. Time after time, he found instances where he'd been dismissive, quick to judgment, or hadn't given young people, especially those from minority communities, the full attention their cases deserved. Each notation in the margins of these files now felt like a personal indictment. Judge Harrison's transformation became visible to everyone at the courthouse. His clerk, Mrs. Reynolds, who had worked with him for 15 years, noticed it first in the small things. The judge began arriving earlier, taking more time to review each case before court began. He started asking for detailed background information about pro-se litigants, particularly young ones. "The look in his eyes is different now," Mrs. Reynolds confided to a colleague. "It's like he's not just seeing case numbers anymore, he's seeing people." One morning, Judge Harrison requested a meeting with the courthouse administration. He proposed a radical change to his courtroom schedule, longer time slots for cases involving young defendants or pro-se litigants, and a mandatory 15-minute break between cases to ensure each matter received proper attention. But Judge Harrison, the court administrator, had protested, "This will reduce the number of cases you can handle each day." "Then we'll handle fewer cases," he replied firmly. "Justice rushed is justice denied. I should have learned that lesson long ago." The judge also began attending community events, something he'd avoided for years. He accepted invitations to speak at local high schools, not to lecture about law and order as he once might have, but to listen and learn from young people's experiences with the justice system. During one such visit, a student asked him about the day Alexandra Thompson appeared in his court. Instead of deflecting or minimizing the incident, Judge Harrison used it as a teaching moment. "I made a mistake that day," he told the packed auditorium. "I looked at Ms. Thompson and saw what I expected to see, a teenager who couldn't possibly understand the law. I forgot the fundamental principle that justice should be blind to age, race, and appearance. It's a lesson I won't forget, and one I hope you'll all remember if you ever find yourself in a position of authority." The change in Judge Harrison extended to his personal life as well. He and Grace began hosting monthly dinners for local youth interested in legal careers. Their dining room, once reserved for formal occasions, now regularly filled with the voices of young people sharing their dreams and concerns about the justice system. "You know what amazes me?" Grace said one evening after their guests had left. "You're smiling more now than you have in years." The judge had to admit she was right. The weight of maintaining his stern judicial persona had been exhausting. Learning to listen, to admit mistakes, to grow, it felt liberating. His transformation didn't go unnoticed by his fellow judges either. At first, some had been skeptical, viewing his changes as an overreaction to one incident. But as they saw the positive responses from litigants, attorneys, and court staff, many began to reconsider their own approaches. Judge Harrison started leading monthly roundtable discussions with his colleagues, sharing what he was learning and encouraging others to examine their own biases. These sessions, initially met with resistance, gradually became valuable forums for honest discussions about prejudice and fairness in the courtroom. "We're not just judges," he told his colleagues during one such meeting. "We're guardians of justice, and that means constantly examining our own prejudices and assumptions. If we can't do that, we have no business sitting on the bench." The judge's most significant personal project emerged from his self-reflection. He began developing a comprehensive training program for judicial candidates, focusing on recognizing and addressing implicit bias. The program included role-playing exercises, discussions with community members, and regular self-assessment tools. "Experience on the bench isn't just about knowing the law," he wrote in the program's introduction. "It's about understanding the human impact of our decisions and recognizing that wisdom can come from unexpected sources." One afternoon, as Judge Harrison was leaving the courthouse, he spotted Alexandra in the lobby, now representing a client of her own. Their eyes met, and he nodded respectfully. She returned the gesture with a small smile, both acknowledging how far they'd come from that first encounter. Later that evening, back in his chambers, he returned to his journal. "Today, I saw the future of our legal system," he wrote. "It's not in grand buildings or complex laws, but in people like Alexandra Thompson, people who have the courage to challenge our assumptions and the wisdom to show us a better way." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "My greatest achievement as a judge won't be the cases I've decided or the judgments I've rendered. It will be learning to see beyond my own prejudices and helping others do the same. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is admit we were wrong and commit ourselves to doing better." As he closed the journal, Judge Harrison glanced at the framed oath of office hanging on his wall. The words, "equal justice under law," seemed to carry new meaning now. His journey of self-reflection had taught him that true justice required more than knowledge of the law, it required humility, empathy, and the courage to change. That evening, as he left the courthouse, the setting sun cast long shadows across the building's stone steps. Judge Harrison paused for a moment, remembering the man he had been just a few months ago. The transformation wasn't complete, he knew it never would be. But each day brought new opportunities to learn, to grow, and to ensure that justice truly was blind to prejudice. The county courthouse had stood on Main Street for over a century, its weathered stone walls witnessing countless stories of justice and injustice. But in the months following Alexandra Thompson's case, the old building began experiencing a transformation that went far beyond its physical structure. Maria Sanchez, the head court clerk with 25 years of experience, noticed the changes first in the morning routine. The usual rushed atmosphere of the filing office had shifted. Where once there was an assembly line mentality of processing papers, now there was a more thoughtful approach to helping people navigate the legal system. "It's like we've all woken up," Maria explained to her colleague during their coffee break. "Yesterday, I spent 15 minutes helping a young man understand his court documents. Before Alexandra's case, I might have just handed him the papers and called the next number." The security staff, often the first point of contact for visitors, had also embraced the new atmosphere. Officer Robert Turner, a courthouse veteran of 18 years, made it his personal mission to make young visitors feel welcome rather than intimidated. "I used to think maintaining order meant being stern and unapproachable," Officer Turner admitted, adjusting his badge. "Now I realize that treating people with respect actually makes my job easier. The whole building feels different." The transformation was particularly evident in the court reporters' pool. These silent observers of courtroom proceedings had witnessed countless instances of bias over the years. Now, they found themselves documenting a very different kind of justice. "I've been recording court sessions for 15 years, said court reporter Patricia Chen. "The transcripts tell the story. Judges are listening more, asking better questions. The whole tone has changed. It's not just about following procedures anymore, it's about understanding people's stories. Even the courthouse cafeteria, long a place where staff gathered to share courthouse gossip, had evolved into a forum for meaningful discussions. The usual complaints about difficult cases and demanding attorneys were replaced by conversations about how to make the justice system more accessible and understanding. One morning, the cafeteria staff noticed Judge Harrison sharing breakfast with a group of high school students who were there for a court tour. The sight of a senior judge explaining legal concepts over pancakes would have been unthinkable just months ago. The probation office, located in the courthouse basement, underwent its own revolution. Probation Officer James Wright implemented a new approach to working with young offenders, inspired by the changes he'd witnessed upstairs. "We started a mentorship program," James explained during a staff meeting. "Instead of just monitoring compliance, we're connecting young people with educational and career opportunities." Alexandra showed us that everyone deserves a chance to exceed expectations. The law library, once a quiet sanctuary for attorneys and law clerks, opened its doors to high school students interested in legal careers. The head librarian, Dr. Eleanor Parks, created a youth-friendly section with simplified legal resources and study spaces. "Knowledge shouldn't be intimidating," Dr. Parks said, arranging a display of basic legal guides. Alexandra Thompson succeeded because she had access to resources and didn't let anyone stop her from learning. "We want to make sure others have the same opportunity." The courthouse's annual staff training day transformed from a tedious requirement into an engaging workshop on bias awareness and community engagement. Role-playing exercises helped staff members understand the impact of their interactions with the public. During one such training session, a veteran bailiff shared a powerful realization. "I used to think my job was just about maintaining order," he said. "Now I understand that how we treat people in these halls can affect their entire view of the justice system." The changes weren't always smooth. Some longtime employees initially resisted the new approach, arguing that it would slow down proceedings and create chaos. But as they witnessed the positive results, fewer confrontations, better compliance with court orders, and increased public trust, even the skeptics began to come around. The courthouse information desk, once staffed by rotating temporary workers, became a crucial point of contact. The administration hired full-time staff members specifically trained to help young people and first-time court visitors understand their rights and responsibilities. "We're not just giving directions anymore," said information specialist Thomas Lee. "We're helping people navigate their way through what can be a frightening experience." When people understand the process, they're more likely to trust the system. The impact extended to the administrative offices as well. Court schedules were reorganized to allow more time for explanations and questions. Forms were rewritten in clearer language, and staff members were encouraged to take the time needed to ensure people understood their rights and obligations. Linda Thompson, the court administrator, implemented a feedback system where court users could share their experiences. The responses were eye-opening. "People aren't just commenting on the outcome of their cases," Linda noted. "They're talking about how they were treated, whether they felt heard and respected." The courthouse maintenance staff noticed physical changes too. The intimidating signs warning about strict rules and penalties were replaced with more welcoming messages explaining courthouse procedures and available resources. Even the building's austere artwork was supplemented with displays celebrating diversity and justice. "We're painting some of the waiting areas in warmer colors," said head of maintenance George Wilson. "It might seem small, but everything we do to make this place less intimidating helps people feel more comfortable seeking justice." The transformation reached beyond the workday. Staff members began volunteering at youth legal education programs, sharing their expertise and helping demystify the legal system for young people. The courthouse softball team even changed its name from the Gavels to the Justice Advocates, reflecting their new mission. One Friday afternoon, Maria Sanchez found herself helping a teenage girl who reminded her of Alexandra. The girl was nervous about an upcoming hearing, clutching her documents tightly. "You know," Maria said gently, "not long ago, someone your age taught us all an important lesson about justice. Let me help you understand exactly what these papers mean and what to expect in court." As the sun set behind the courthouse's stained glass windows, the building seemed to hold its new energy, a spirit of accessibility, understanding, and true justice. The change that began with one remarkable teenager had transformed not just procedures and policies, but the hearts and minds of those who worked within these historic walls. For the first time in its long history, the courthouse felt less like an intimidating institution and more like what it was always meant to be, a place where justice was truly accessible to all, regardless of age, background, or experience. 6 months after her memorable courtroom encounter, Alexandra Thompson found herself standing before a very different audience. The community center's multipurpose room was packed with teenagers, their eyes fixed on the young lawyer who had become their unexpected champion. "The law isn't just for people in expensive suits," Alexandra told the group, pacing the floor in her casual blazer and jeans. "It's your law too. It's meant to protect you, serve you, and yes, you have every right to understand it and use it." The Youth Legal Empowerment Program, or ILEP as it had come to be known, was Alexandra's latest initiative. What started as informal meetings with a handful of interested high school students had grown into a structured program operating in community centers across the city. Today's session focused on teaching young people about their rights during interactions with authority figures. The students leaned forward, taking notes as Alexandra broke down complex legal concepts into relatable examples. "Remember last month when the mall security guards were randomly searching teenagers' bags?" she asked. A chorus of frustrated agreements filled the room. "Well, let's talk about your Fourth Amendment rights and what you can actually do in that situation." Among the attendees was Darnell Washington, a 16-year-old who had initially come to ILEP thinking it would look good on college applications. Now, he was one of the program's most dedicated participants. "Before meeting Alexandra, I thought lawyers were just people who talked fancy and made things complicated," Darnell shared during the break. "But she shows us how the law can be a tool for change. Last week, I helped my cousin understand his rights when he got pulled over. That knowledge? It's power." Alexandra's influence extended beyond the community center walls. She had begun partnering with local schools to integrate basic legal education into their curricula. The program, called Know Your Rights 101, was already running in 5 high schools, with more on the waiting list. Principal Gloria Martinez of East Side High School noticed an immediate impact. "Since implementing Alexandra's program, we've seen a 40% decrease in disciplinary issues," she reported. "When students understand their rights and responsibilities, they're more likely to handle conflicts constructively." The success of these initiatives caught the attention of the State Education Board. They invited Alexandra to help develop a standardized legal awareness curriculum for high schools across the state. It was an opportunity to impact thousands of young lives. "We're not trying to turn every student into a lawyer," Alexandra explained during a board meeting. "We're giving them the tools to navigate a system that affects their daily lives. Whether it's understanding their rights at work, knowing how to handle a traffic stop, or helping their families with basic legal documents, this knowledge is essential." Her work didn't go unnoticed by the legal community either. Law firms began sending junior associates to volunteer at ILEP sessions, creating a bridge between traditional legal practice and community advocacy. "Working with these kids changes how you view the law," said Associate Attorney Jennifer Park after volunteering at a session. "They ask questions we never thought to ask in law school. They challenge our assumptions. It's making us all better lawyers." Alexandra also started a mentorship network, connecting young people interested in legal careers with practicing attorneys. The network paid special attention to students from underrepresented communities who might not have traditional pathways into the legal profession. "Alexandra showed us it's possible," said high school senior Teresa Rodriguez. "She's not just telling us we can do it, she's actually helping us get there," step by step. The program's impact became evident when several ILEP participants successfully advocated for changes in their school district's disciplinary policies. They used their legal knowledge to present a compelling case to the school board, complete with precedents and statistical analysis. "That's when I knew we were really making a difference," Alexandra confided to her mother. "They didn't just learn about the law, they're using it to create positive change in their communities." The local bar association took notice and created a scholarship fund named after Alexandra, specifically designed to support young people pursuing early legal education. The first recipient was a 16-year-old who had been inspired by Alexandra's story to start a legal rights club at his school. Even national organizations began reaching out. Alexandra was invited to speak at conferences about youth empowerment and legal education. Her approach to making law accessible to young people was becoming a model for programs across the country. The most powerful moment, Alexandra shared during one conference, is when you see a young person realize they're not powerless. When they understand that the law isn't just something that happens to them, it's something they can actively engage with and use to protect themselves and their communities. The impact of her work became particularly clear one afternoon when a group of ILEP students successfully helped a local youth center negotiate a new lease agreement. They had studied contract basics in the program and were able to identify several unfair terms in the original lease. "That's real-world impact," Alexandra beamed as she watched the students celebrate their victory. "They're not just learning about the law, they're using it to protect spaces that matter to their community." As ILEP continued to grow, Alexandra made sure to maintain its grassroots connection. She insisted on keeping classes small and interactive, even as demand increased. Each session included time for students to share their experiences and concerns, ensuring the program remained relevant to their needs. "Laws can change society," she often told her students, "but first, we need to change who has access to legal knowledge. Every one of you has the right to understand and use the legal system." One evening, as Alexandra was leaving the community center after a particularly energetic session, she spotted a young girl sitting alone, clutching a legal textbook. "Thinking about becoming a lawyer?" Alexandra asked, sitting down beside her. The girl nodded shyly. "Everyone says I'm too young to think about it. But I heard about what you did in Judge Harrison's courtroom." Alexandra smiled, remembering her own journey. "You know what? Sometimes being young is your superpower. It means you can see things that need to change, and you're brave enough to believe you can change them." As she drove home that night, Alexandra reflected on how far things had come from that day in court. What started as a simple traffic case had sparked a movement, empowering young people to understand and engage with the legal system that affected their lives. The Youth Legal Empowerment Program was more than just classes and workshops, it was a growing community of young people who believed in their power to create change. And for Alexandra, that was the greatest victory of all. Judge Harrison stood at the podium of the National Judicial Conference, facing hundreds of his peers from across the country. The man who once dismissed a teenage lawyer was now here to teach other judges about the importance of eliminating bias from their courtrooms. "My transformation began with humiliation," he admitted, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "But it evolved into something far more meaningful, a mission to change not just myself, but our entire approach to justice." The Judges Mentorship Initiative, as it had come to be known, was rapidly becoming a model for judicial reform across the country. What started as informal discussions in his chambers had grown into a comprehensive program for both new and experienced judges. "The robe doesn't make us infallible," he told a group of newly appointed judges during their orientation. "If anything, it should remind us of our responsibility to constantly examine our biases and assumptions." The program's cornerstone was its shadowing system. New judges spent their first month observing courtrooms where judges had implemented bias-aware practices. They watched as their mentors handled cases with patience and understanding, particularly when dealing with young or disadvantaged defendants. One such mentee was Judge Sarah Chen, who had recently been appointed to the bench. Watching Judge Harrison's court is like seeing justice in its purest form, she reflected. He takes time to ensure everyone understands the proceedings, regardless of their age or background. It's changing how I view my role as a judge. The transformation in Judge Harrison's own courtroom continued to evolve. He had installed a youth advisory panel that met monthly to provide feedback on how the court could better serve young people. Their insights led to several practical changes, from simplified legal forms to more flexible hearing schedules for students. Young people aren't just the future of our legal system, he often said. They're its present conscience. We need to listen to them. His partnership with Alexandra Thompson had also deepened. They co-authored a guide for judges on working with young litigants, drawing from both his decades of experience and her unique perspective as a youth advocate. The beauty of this collaboration, Alexandra shared during a joint presentation, is that it shows how different generations can work together to improve the justice system. Judge Harrison brings years of legal wisdom, while I bring the fresh perspective of youth. Together, we're creating something revolutionary. The judge's commitment to change extended beyond the courthouse. He began hosting monthly dinner discussions at his home, where judges, attorneys, and young legal advocates could discuss challenges and solutions in an informal setting. During one such dinner, a young public defender asked him how he handled the skepticism from some of his more traditional colleagues. "I tell them about my own journey," Harrison replied, setting down his coffee cup. "About how being proven wrong by a 17-year-old was the best thing that ever happened to my career. It's hard to argue with a story of personal transformation." His wife Grace had become an integral part of these gatherings, often providing the voice of compassion that helped bridge gaps between different perspectives. "Richard used to bring his work home in the form of stress," she told a friend. "Now he brings it home in the form of hope." The impact of Judge Harrison's initiative began showing in concrete ways. Courts that implemented his mentorship program reported increased public trust, better compliance with court orders, and fewer appeals based on judicial bias. "It's not just about being fair," he explained to a journalist. "It's about creating an environment where justice is both done and seen to be done. Where every person who enters our courtroom feels heard and respected." His efforts caught the attention of the state Supreme Court, which appointed him to lead a task force on judicial reform. The assignment gave him a platform to implement systemic changes across the entire state court system. "We're rewriting our judicial training manuals," he announced at a press conference. "Adding sections on youth engagement, bias recognition, and cultural competency. These aren't optional skills anymore, they're fundamental to being a good judge." The judge also started a scholarship program for young people interested in legal careers, particularly those from underserved communities. He named it the Second Look Scholarship, a reminder of how his own second look at his biases had led to such profound change. "Every time I award these scholarships," he shared during a ceremony, "I'm reminded of that day in court with Ms. Thompson. Sometimes our greatest teachers come in unexpected packages." His commitment to mentoring extended to personal interactions as well. He began holding regular office hours where anyone, from new lawyers to high school students, could seek advice about legal careers or justice system reform. One afternoon, a young man walked into his chambers looking nervous. He explained that he had recently been released from juvenile detention and wanted to become a lawyer to help others like himself. 10 years ago, I might have dismissed his dreams, Harrison later confided to his wife. Today, I spent 2 hours helping him plan his path to law school. That's the real meaning of justice, believing in potential, not just punishing mistakes. The judge's example inspired other senior judges to start their own mentoring programs. A network of reform-minded judges began to grow, sharing best practices and supporting each other in their efforts to create more inclusive courtrooms. "We're not just changing procedures," he told his colleagues during a training session. "We're changing the culture of our courts." Every interaction is an opportunity to build trust and demonstrate fairness. As his initiative gained momentum, Judge Harrison never forgot the lesson that started it all. He kept a photo on his desk of that first encounter with Alexandra, a reminder that wisdom can come from unexpected sources and that it's never too late to learn and grow. The future of justice, he wrote in his journal one evening, isn't just in our laws or our courthouses. It's in our willingness to listen to new voices, to admit our mistakes, and to believe that everyone deserves a chance to be heard. The judge's transformation from a stern, biased authority figure to a compassionate mentor and advocate for change had become a powerful testament to the possibility of institutional reform. His story proved that one moment of humility could spark a lifetime of positive change. As he prepared for another day in court, Judge Harrison straightened his robe and smiled at his reflection. The man looking back at him was no longer just a judge, he was a teacher, a mentor, and above all, a student of justice in its truest form. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in courtroom 7B. The old county courthouse still stood proud on Main Street, but inside, the changes were profound. On a bright spring morning, hundreds gathered in the building's Grand Assembly Hall to celebrate the graduation of the first class of the Youth Justice Leadership Program, a direct result of the seeds planted by Alexandra Thompson and Judge Harrison. The Assembly Hall buzzed with energy as young graduates in their royal blue robes mingled with judges, lawyers, and community leaders. Among them was Darnell Washington, now 21 and about to start law school, who had been inspired by Alexandra's story 5 years ago. "When I think about how all this started," Alexandra said during her keynote speech, "with a simple traffic ticket and a judge's laugh, it seems almost unbelievable. But that's how change often happens, not through grand plans, but through moments that force us to confront our assumptions." The statistics spoke volumes. In the 5 years since the implementation of youth-focused judicial reforms, the county had seen a 70% reduction in youth recidivism rates. The number of young people pursuing legal education had tripled, with particular growth among minority communities. Judge Harrison, now serving as the head of the State Judicial Ethics Committee, sat in the front row, his eyes bright with pride. The programs he and Alexandra had developed were being implemented in courthouses across the country, creating a new generation of judges committed to accessible justice. "The real success story isn't in the numbers," he shared during the ceremony. "It's in the changed lives, the restored faith in justice, and the bridges we've built between the legal system and the communities it serves." The impact extended far beyond the courthouse walls. Local schools had incorporated legal literacy into their standard curriculum, teaching students not just about their rights, but about their role in shaping a fair and equitable justice system. Alexandra's Youth Legal Empowerment Program had expanded to 50 cities nationwide, creating a network of young legal advocates who were changing their communities from within. Many of its earliest participants were now lawyers themselves, carrying forward the mission of making justice accessible to all. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how young people interact with the legal system," noted Dr. Rivera, a researcher studying the program's impact. "They're no longer passive recipients of justice, they're active participants in shaping it." The changes were visible in countless small ways. Courthouse waiting rooms now featured youth liaison officers trained to explain procedures in accessible language. Legal forms had been redesigned with clear, simple instructions, and a mobile app developed by program graduates helped people navigate the court system. Perhaps most significantly, the relationship between the judiciary and the community had transformed. Regular town halls brought judges and citizens together for open discussions about justice and fairness. Young people were no longer intimidated by the system, they were engaging with it, challenging it, and helping it evolve. "What we've created here," Alexandra explained to a visiting delegation from another state, "is more than just a program. It's a new way of thinking about justice, one that recognizes that wisdom and authority can come from unexpected places." Judge Harrison's mentorship initiative had grown into a national model for judicial training. New judges now spent their first month working directly with youth advocates, learning to see the system through different eyes. The old guard of stern, unapproachable judges was giving way to a new generation of empathetic, accessible judicial leaders. "I used to think respect came from fear," a senior judge admitted during a training session. "Now I understand it comes from trust, from showing people that justice isn't just a concept in law books, it's a living, breathing thing that belongs to all of us." The impact on individual lives was equally profound. Maria Ramirez, a former ILEP participant, now ran her own legal aid clinic focusing on youth rights. "Alexandra showed us that age doesn't determine capability," she said. "Judge Harrison showed us that it's never too late to change. Together, they showed us that the justice system can be both powerful and compassionate." The courthouse itself had become a symbol of this transformation. Art created by local youth decorated its walls, telling stories of justice and hope. The intimidating security checkpoints had been redesigned to be welcoming while maintaining safety. Even the cafeteria had become a space for informal mentoring sessions between judges and young aspiring lawyers. "We're not just changing procedures," Alexandra reflected during a quiet moment. "We're changing the very culture of justice. Every person who walks through these doors should feel that they belong here, that their voice matters." The program's success had attracted international attention. Delegations from other countries regularly visited to study how a chance encounter between a teenage lawyer and a biased judge had sparked a revolution in judicial reform. "It's a reminder," Judge Harrison told one such delegation, "that change doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it takes someone brave enough to challenge the system and someone humble enough to admit they were wrong." As the graduation ceremony concluded, Alexandra and Judge Harrison stood together, watching the new graduates celebrate with their families. The sight of young people from all backgrounds, united in their commitment to justice, was the ultimate validation of their work. "You know," Judge Harrison said softly, "when you first walked into my courtroom 5 years ago, I thought I was the authority on justice. You taught me that true authority comes from the willingness to listen and learn." Alexandra smiled, remembering that day. "And you taught me that real change happens when we work together, when we combine experience with fresh perspective, when we value both tradition and innovation." The graduates tossed their caps into the air, a shower of blue against the courthouse's marble columns. In that moment, it was clear that the story that began with a judge's laugh and a teenager's courage had grown into something far greater, a legacy of change that would continue to shape the justice system for generations to come. As the celebration continued, a young girl approached Alexandra and Judge Harrison, clutching a law book. "I want to be like both of you," she said earnestly. "I want to help make justice fair for everyone." They exchanged a knowing look, recognizing in her the same spark that had started their journey. The cycle was beginning again, with new voices ready to carry forward the mission of making justice truly accessible to all. The sun streamed through the courthouse windows, illuminating the words carved above the entrance, "Equal justice under law." Thanks to the unlikely partnership of a teenage lawyer and a reformed judge, these words were no longer just an ideal, they were becoming a reality, one changed life at a time.